He said it out loud, in front of her, with a room full of people watching. "What I need is a wife, not an employee." The words hit Lily Carter like a slap across the face. She didn't cry, she didn't run. She stood perfectly still, folder pressed against her chest, and looked that man dead in the eye with something he clearly didn't expect: absolute calm. And that one moment, that one careless sentence, from a broken, exhausted single dad, it set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You are not going to want to miss what happens next. The rain came down hard on a Tuesday morning in late October. Not the soft, romantic kind of rain that people in movies stand in while they figure out they're in love. This was a cold, aggressive Colorado rain, the kind that slaps you in the face and reminds you that the world doesn't care how tired you are. Ethan Walker hadn't slept. Not really. He'd closed his eyes somewhere around 2 in the morning and opened them again at 5:15 when Sophie's alarm clock went off down the hall, that ridiculous alarm that played a high-pitched version of "You Are My Sunshine" that she'd picked out herself 3 years ago and absolutely refused to change. He lay there for 60 seconds, staring at the water stain on the ceiling above his bed. It had been there for 8 months. He kept meaning to fix it. He never fixed it. He rolled out of bed, and that was the beginning of Tuesday, October 14th, the day that would mark the before and after of Ethan Walker's entire life. Though he wouldn't know that for several more hours. He moved through the house on autopilot, made Sophie's lunch peanut butter and grape jelly on white bread, because she still wouldn't eat the whole wheat, no matter how many times he tried. An apple, a small bag of pretzels, a juice box with the straw already half attached because Sophie always lost the straw at school and then came home furious about it. He made her lunch and set it on the counter and then stood in front of the coffee maker for a full 45 seconds before he remembered he hadn't put a pod in it. "Dad." Sophie appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, her dark curly hair going 3 different directions. She was 8 years old and she already had the kind of stare that could make a grown man feel like he was failing a test he hadn't studied for. "You're still in your pajamas." "I'm aware." "We have to leave in 20 minutes." "I'm aware. You also left the back door unlocked again last night." He turned around. "How do you know that?" "Because I locked it when I got up to get water at midnight." She crossed her arms. She was 8. She crossed her arms like a 40-year-old woman who had run out of patience. "Dad, you have to get it together. I'm working on it. You've been working on it for a year." He opened his mouth, closed it, poured his coffee, the pod was in now. He'd remembered, and took a long sip and looked at his daughter and thought, not for the first time, that Sophie was the only thing in his life that was operating correctly. Everything else was a disaster. The bakery was 4 blocks from Sophie's school, which had seemed like a practical arrangement when Ethan first bought it 7 years ago. Back when Claire was still alive and they had plans, real plans, detailed plans, the kind you sketch out on the back of napkins and tape to the refrigerator. A family business, a legacy, something to pass down. That was the plan. Claire died of a brain aneurysm on a Thursday afternoon in March. 5 years ago. She was 30 years old. She was fine on Wednesday. She was gone on Thursday, and that was it. That was the whole story of how Ethan Walker's plans became wreckage. He kept the bakery because he didn't know what else to do. He kept the bakery because Claire had loved it. Because she'd spent 3 weekends picking out the paint color for the front wall, a warm, creamy yellow, that she said felt like early morning, and he couldn't bring himself to change it. He kept the bakery because Sophie needed stability. And stability meant routine, and routine meant the bakery opened at 6:30 every morning, whether Ethan felt like opening it or not. Mostly, he did not feel like it, but he opened it anyway. That Tuesday, he dropped Sophie at school, drove the 4 blocks to the bakery, and walked into a scene that had become disturbingly normal. His part-time assistant, Marco, had called in sick in the 3rd time this month. The refrigerator in the back had been making a grinding noise since Friday that Ethan kept hoping would just stop on its own. 3 orders sitting on the counter from yesterday had been either forgotten or incorrectly filed. He couldn't tell which, and he didn't have time to figure it out. The display case near the front window was half empty, which meant he'd either forgotten to restock it last night, or he'd restocked it and somehow used those products already. And either option was equally alarming. A voicemail on the bakery phone from a client named Mrs. Donnelly, who had ordered a birthday cake for Saturday and was calling to confirm details that Ethan had absolutely no memory of. He stood in the middle of the bakery at 6:45 in the morning. Rain hammering the front window, coffee going cold in his hand. And he had a very clear, very specific thought. I am drowning. Not metaphorically. Well, yes, metaphorically, but it felt physical. It felt like water coming in from all directions, and he was paddling with one hand because the other hand was always holding Sophie, and the bakery, and the bills, and the grief, and all the other pieces of the life he was supposed to be managing. He set his coffee down on the counter, pushed the forgotten orders to one side, and started doing what he did every morning. Triage. Figure out what absolutely had to happen in the next 2 hours, and ignore everything else until it was screaming at him. It wasn't a system. It was barely survival, but it was what he had. He was elbow deep in a batch of sourdough starter when he heard the bell above the door. The bakery didn't officially open until 8, and it was barely past 7. He almost didn't come out from the back. He was going to call out that they were closed, that they opened at 8, that they'd have fresh product by then, but something made him walk to the front instead. Maybe it was the particular sound the door made. Something deliberate about it. Not the casual push of someone who wasn't paying attention, but the specific intentional movement of someone who had thought about this. Or maybe he just needed a reason to stop thinking about the sourdough. He walked out from the back, wiping his hands on his apron, and stopped. She was standing in the middle of his bakery. She was a plus-size woman, somewhere in her late 20s, wearing a deep burgundy blazer over a white blouse, dark slacks, low heels that were slightly wet from the rain. Her hair was pulled back, natural, and she wore small gold earrings that caught the light from the display case. She was holding a manila folder pressed against her chest with both hands, and a small umbrella dripped quietly onto the tile near her feet. She looked around the bakery the way someone looks at a house they're considering buying, taking everything in, noting things, not judging exactly, but assessing. Then she looked at Ethan. She had dark brown eyes and the kind of direct gaze that made you feel like she already knew 3 things about you that you hadn't told her. I know you're not open yet, she said. Her voice was steady. But I saw your ad on Tuesday morning, and I wanted to get here before anyone else. Ethan blinked. What ad? She tilted her head slightly. The job posting. On the community board at the library? And on that local jobs Facebook group. She paused. Walker Family Bakery seeking experienced baker and general operations assistant. Full-time. Immediate start. She paused again. That's yours? Ethan thought for a moment. Right. The ad. He'd posted it 6 weeks ago in a moment of desperation, after his last assistant quit without notice. And then he'd basically forgotten about it, because no one had responded, and he'd moved on to managing the chaos himself. That's mine, he said. You're here about the job. Yes. She extended her hand across the counter. Firm, professional. I'm Lily Carter. He shook her hand. Ethan Walker. I know, she said. It's your bakery. He almost smiled. Almost. She set the manila folder on the counter and opened it, with the precise movements of someone who had done this many times and was not going to apologize for being prepared. I've been baking since I was 12, she said. Professionally, for 6 years. I've worked in 2 commercial kitchens, 1 catering company, and a boutique pastry shop in Denver that you've probably heard of, La Belle Maison. She glanced up. I left because the owner was expanding to 3 locations, and the working conditions were deteriorating. I wasn't willing to compromise on quality. She slid a sheet across the counter. Certifications, food safety, Pastry Arts, a business management certificate from a community college in Denver. I also have experience in inventory management, vendor negotiation, order systems, and customer relations, she continued. I can do the books if you need it. Though I'd recommend an accountant for taxes. She paused, looked around the bakery again, took in the half-empty display case, the stack of papers by the register, the general sense of a ship that was technically still sailing, but taking on water. And based on what I can see right now, I think I can help you with more than baking. Ethan looked at the certifications. Looked at her, he should have said yes right there. Or at least, let's sit down and talk. But he was exhausted. He was overwhelmed. He had sourdough starter that he needed to get back to. And 3 confused orders. And Mrs. Donnelly's voicemail. And a refrigerator making sounds that a refrigerator should not make. And standing in front of him was a woman who was composed and confident and clearly more organized than anyone who had walked through his door in months. And instead of reacting to any of that the way a reasonable person would, his brain went somewhere else entirely. He looked at the chaos around him, the papers, the empty case, the general wreckage of his operational life, and he heard himself say, honestly, he exhaled, rubbed the back of his neck, said the words that had been rattling around in his head all morning. Said them out loud without thinking about who was standing on the other side of the counter. What I need is a wife, not an employee. The words hung in the air. He heard them the second they left his mouth. The way you hear a glass hit the floor before it shatters, that half second, where you know what's already happening and can't stop it. The look on Lily Carter's face changed. Not dramatically. Not the way it would in a movie, where someone breaks down, or storms out, or throws something. It was quieter than that. And somehow worse. The professional warmth drained out of her expression slowly. Like water pulling back from a shore, and what replaced it was something careful and still, and completely unreadable. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, quietly and precisely interesting, I came here to show you my skills, Mr. Walker, not to apply to manage your personal life. The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds. To Ethan, it lasted considerably longer. He felt the heat climb into his face. He set down the certification sheet he'd been holding. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. That wasn't. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. How did you mean it? He gestured vaguely at the disaster around him. My life, the bakery, the all of this. He shook his head. I'm not sleeping. My assistant quit. I've got orders I can't track, and a refrigerator that's dying, and my 8-year-old already lectures me about locking the back door. I was talking about myself, about my own mess. He met her eyes. Not about you. I wasn't making a comment about you. Lily regarded him. She didn't soften immediately. But she didn't leave either. Okay, she said finally. I'm sorry. That was a thoughtless thing to say to someone who just walked in here with a folder full of credentials and a better handle on their professional life than I have on my entire existence. Something shifted in her expression barely. Just a fraction. Not a smile exactly, but a slight release of the tension around her eyes. That's a more accurate description, she said. I'm aware. She glanced down at the folder, then back up at him. So, do you want to see what I can actually do? Or would you like to keep explaining what you meant? Ethan looked at her, at the folder, at the chaos behind him. He thought about Sophie saying, you have to get it together. He thought about the water stain on the ceiling he'd been meaning to fix for 8 months. He thought about the last time anything in his life had worked the way it was supposed to. Show me what you can do, he said. She picked up the folder, held it against her chest again, the way she had when she walked in. And she said, not aggressively, not bitterly, but with a quiet, precise kind of weight that he would think about later, much later, when he was alone. Judge me by my work, Mr. Walker, not by your assumptions. She walked past him toward the kitchen, and Ethan stood exactly where he was for a moment, holding nothing, and thought, she's right. What happened in the next 3 hours surprised him. He hadn't planned to give her a real trial that day. He'd expected, if he was being honest with himself, to let her putter around in the kitchen for an hour, thank her politely, and then think about it for a week and probably not call her back, because inertia was a powerful force and he was very good at avoiding decisions. That's not what happened. Lily walked into the back kitchen, looked around for approximately 90 seconds, and then asked him where he kept his inventory records. "In the binder," he said. "Second shelf." She pulled out the binder, opened it, looked at 3 pages, closed it again, looked at him with an expression that was diplomatically neutral, but communicated a great deal. "How long has this system been in place?" she asked. "About 2 years. What system existed before this one?" "Post-it notes." "On what?" "On the shelf, and the refrigerator, and sometimes the back of my hand." She absorbed this information with the composure of a person who has already decided not to say what they're thinking. "Okay," she said. "Can I see the orders that came in yesterday?" He handed her the 3 folders on the counter. She opened each one, read them, arranged them in a specific order on the prep table, pulled a pen from her blazer pocket. She had a pen in her blazer pocket. A detail Ethan found oddly impressive, and made 3 small notations. "Mrs. Donnelly's birthday cake is for Saturday at 2 o'clock, she said. She wants 3 tiers. Vanilla bean with raspberry filling. And she specifically requested decorations in blue and gold because it's her husband's 65th and those are his college colors." She looked up. "Did you note any of that?" "I have a voicemail from her. She also emailed." He stared. "How do you know that?" "Because the order form has an email address and the voicemail notation says follow up, which means someone heard it and wrote that down. And then, she looked at the form, also wrote confirm details, and then, apparently, did neither." She looked at him. "Is the email account for the bakery linked to your phone?" "Theoretically. Is it practically?" "I haven't checked it since Thursday." Another moment of diplomatically neutral expression. "Okay," she said. "I'm going to answer Mrs. Donnelly's email and confirm the order. Then, I'm going to look at what you have in the back and figure out what you need to order to get that cake done by Saturday. While I'm doing that, is the sourdough starter still active? Or did you leave it too long?" He'd left it too long. She already knew that. She was asking as a courtesy. He liked that about her. He wouldn't fully realize he liked it until later. She stayed for 4 hours. In those 4 hours, she answered Mrs. Donnelly's email, sorted the 3 backlogged orders by priority and deadline, identified 2 other orders in the binder that he had also forgotten, one from a repeat customer named Gary Holt, who ordered a dozen assorted pastries every Friday without fail, and one from the local elementary school that had an event coming up, made a list of what was low in inventory, called the refrigerator repairman herself. After asking Ethan if he had a preferred one, he did not. She found one on her phone. It had good reviews. She made the appointment and baked a batch of lemon poppy seed muffins from scratch to fill the front display case while doing all of the above. The muffins were objectively extraordinary. He ate one without meaning to. It was just sitting there, and he was walking past and he picked it up and bit into it and stopped walking because he needed a second. "These are good," he called toward the kitchen. "I know," she called back. He stood in the front of the bakery and ate the rest of the muffin and looked at the display case, full now. Organized. The products presented in a way that actually invited you to look at them, instead of just sitting there like an afterthought, and he thought about the way she had walked in that morning with her folder and her pen and her direct brown eyes and said, "Judge me by my work, not by your assumptions." He had been judging her, not about her size, not consciously, but he'd felt the exhaustion and the overwhelm, and he'd said something careless and dismissive to a woman who had driven through a cold October rain at 7 in the morning to stand in his disorganized bakery and offer him a way out. He stood there, eating a lemon poppy seed muffin that was better than anything he'd produced in months. And he felt something that took him a moment to name. Shame. But not the paralyzing kind. The clarifying kind. The kind that makes you want to do something differently. When Lily came out from the back, she was carrying her folder and her umbrella. The rain had stopped sometime in the last hour. He could see through the front window that the sidewalk was bright with reflected sunlight. That particular blinding clarity that comes after a heavy rain.
"The refrigerator appointment is Thursday at 10.
Shia said. I put it in the paper calendar by the register because I wasn't sure if you had a digital system you actually use. I also flagged the 2 orders I mentioned. Those need to be confirmed today. Not tomorrow. She paused. The lemon muffins should hold until about 2 o'clock. After that, they'll start to dry out if you have leftovers. Ethan looked at her, at everything she had done in 4 hours. At the bakery that somehow looked and functioned differently than it had that morning. I'd like to offer you the job, he said. She didn't immediately say yes. She looked at him for a moment. And he understood without her saying anything that she was deciding whether or not she believed him not about the job, but about what the job would actually look like. Whether he would value what she brought to it, or whether she would spend the next 3 months being underestimated. Samantha, who had greeted her first application with a comment about needing a wife. Full-time? She said. Full-time. What are the hours? He told her. She asked 3 more questions. Pay, which he slightly increased when he said it out loud, because the number in his head was embarrassing given what he'd just seen her do. Scheduling flexibility for a class she was taking on Tuesday evenings, and what his expectations were for the role. He answered honestly, I expect you to keep the bakery from sinking. Beyond that, I'm open. She looked at him, and for the first time since she'd walked through his door, Lily Carter smiled, not the professional, calibrated warmth she'd walked in with, but something smaller and more real. Okay, Mr. Walker, she said. I'll take it. She put out her hand, he shook it, and this time, he paid attention to the firmness of her grip, the steadiness of her gaze, the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly what they were worth. He told Sophie about it at dinner that night. She was eating pasta and listening with the focused intensity she brought to all information she deemed important, which included anything related to the bakery, any information about dessert, and anything that involved a new person entering their orbit. You hired someone new, she said. Her name is Lily. She starts Monday. What's she like? He thought about it. About the folder, the pen in the blazer pocket, the muffins, the refrigerator appointment. The way she said, judge me by my work, not by your assumptions with that particular. Careful wait. She's very good at what she does, he said. Sophie twirled pasta around her fork. Is she nice? I think so. You think so or you know so? Sophie, I'm just asking. He looked at his daughter, at the dark curly hair she'd gotten from her mother, the precise evaluating gaze she'd apparently developed entirely on her own, the way she held her fork, like she was preparing for a formal interview. I know so, he said. She seems genuinely nice. Sophie considered this, nodded once, as if he'd passed a preliminary round. Good, she said. You need nice people. He didn't argue, because she was right. And he was starting to understand that Sophie was right about most things. And somewhere across town, in an apartment he didn't know, a woman named Lily Carter was probably reorganizing something, her notes from the day, her plan for Monday morning, her thoughts about the disorganized, exhausted, well-meaning man who had insulted her, and then hired her, and then eaten her muffin with the expression of someone encountering something they hadn't expected. The before of Ethan Walker's life ended on a Tuesday morning in October. He just didn't know it yet. Coming up in part 2, Lily begins transforming the bakery, but what she uncovers in the back of those records goes deeper than lost orders. And as Sophie starts to call her by her first name, Ethan realizes that the problem in his business isn't the only thing Lily Carter is quietly, steadily fixing. She turned to walk out the door, and that's when Ethan Walker did something nobody in that bakery expected, including himself. He stepped around the counter. Not slowly, not casually. He moved fast. The way a man moves when he realizes he's about to lose something he can't afford to lose, even if he doesn't fully understand what that thing is yet. His apron was still dusted with flour. His hair was a mess. He had dark circles under his eyes that told the story of 1,000 bad nights. And he stepped around that counter and said, louder than he meant to, Wait. Lily stopped with her hand on the door. She didn't turn around immediately. She stood there for a moment. And Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she was deciding not whether to be angry. She was already angry, she had every right to be, but whether he was worth one more second of her time. She turned around slowly. "You have 5 seconds," she said. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. He was a man who baked bread for a living, who talked to his 8-year-old daughter more than any other human being on earth, who had not had a real conversation with another adult in longer than he could honestly remember, and the words he needed were somewhere inside him. But they were buried under 5 years of exhaustion and grief, and the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people and still feeling completely alone. "I'm sorry," he said. "That was what I said was wrong. Not just the way it came out. The whole thing. I looked at you, walking in here, and I was already somewhere else in my head. Already drowning in my own mess, and I said something careless to someone who didn't deserve careless." He paused. "That's not an excuse. That's just what happened." Lily looked at him. Her hand was still on the door. "Which part are you apologizing for?" she said. "The comment about needing a wife? Or the fact that you said it to a woman who, with 6 years of professional experience and a folder full of credentials that you didn't even finish looking at?" "Both," he said. "All of it. Because those are 2 different apologies." "I know." She studied him for a moment, the kind of study that doesn't miss anything. Then she let go of the door handle, crossed her arms over her chest, and said, "What is it you think you actually need, Mr. Walker? Because I'm going to be honest with you. This place is one bad week away from a crisis you won't be able to manage alone." He looked around the bakery. He knew she was right. He'd known it for months. "I need someone who can help me keep this alive," he said quietly. "That's what I need." "Then hire me to do that," she said. "And never again make the mistake of confusing what I'm capable of with what your personal life is missing." She walked back to the counter, picked up her folder, set it back down in front of him, and opened it to page 1. "Let's start over," she said. And that was the moment, not the apology. Not the 5 seconds she gave him, but the moment she walked back to that counter, that Ethan Walker began to understand that Lily Carter was unlike anyone he had ever met. That first week, she didn't try to fix everything at once. That was the first thing that surprised him. He'd expected, based on nothing except his own assumptions, which she had already correctly identified as a problem, that she would come in guns blazing, reorganizing everything, pointing out every failure with the precision of someone making a point. He'd worked with people like that before. People who confused disruption with improvement. Lily wasn't like that. She came in Monday morning at 5:15 before Ethan himself arrived, and she was already in the kitchen when he walked through the back door. Already working, already familiar with where things were, in a way that told him she'd paid close attention on that first morning, even while he was busy underestimating her. "You're early," he said. "I'm always early," she said, without looking up from the proofing dough she was checking. Early tells you things about a kitchen that on time doesn't. Like what? Like how the temperature behaves overnight. Whether the yeast is active the way it should be at this hour. Whether the refrigerator is holding correctly. She paused, pressed 2 fingers lightly against the dough, watched it respond. "Your yeast is slightly sluggish. Not a problem yet, but worth watching. And your refrigerator is running about 3 degrees warmer than it reads on the dial." Ethan stared at her. "I just had that refrigerator serviced on Thursday." "I know. I made the appointment." She finally looked at him. "The technician fixed the motor. But the calibration on the dial is still off. It's a small thing, but small things in a bakery compound." He didn't say anything for a moment. "How did you know that in 45 minutes?" he said. "I paid attention," she said, simply. Like it wasn't remarkable. Like paying attention was just something you did. He thought about all the mornings he'd walked into his own kitchen and not paid that kind of attention. All the small things he'd missed because he was already thinking about the next crisis before the current one was resolved. He went out front to open the display case and didn't say anything else. But he thought about it all day. By Wednesday of that first week, she had created a new order tracking system that lived both on paper, because she'd noticed Ethan was more reliable with physical documents, and on a shared digital calendar she'd set up on his phone and the bakery tablet. She showed him how it worked, standing side by side at the counter. Patient and specific, not condescending. Not performing patience the way some people do when they think they're smarter than you. It's not complicated, she said. You just have to touch the system once a day. Every morning. 5 minutes. That's all it needs. I don't always have 5 minutes in the morning. You don't have 5 minutes. But you have the time to spend 20 minutes 3 times a week figuring out what you forgot. She looked at him sideways. Not unkind, just direct. Prevention is cheaper than emergency, in kitchens and in life. He said nothing. She was right, and he knew she was right, and the particular discomfort of being clearly, inarguably corrected by someone you initially underestimated, was something he was going to have to get used to. Thursday brought the first real test. A local restaurant owner, named Dennis Farrell, came in a man Ethan had been trying to secure as a wholesale account for over a year. Farrell ran 3 restaurants in the area, and he was the kind of account that could stabilize a small black income in a way that individual retail sales never quite managed. Ethan had pitched him twice before, and both times Farrell had been politely non-committal, which in business language meant no. Farrell came in on Thursday afternoon while Lily was reorganizing the front display case. He looked at her once, looked at Ethan and said, "You've got new staff?" "New operations manager," Ethan said. It was the first time he'd used that title out loud. He hadn't planned to say it that way. It came out naturally. Lily glanced at him. Just for a second. Farrell introduced himself to her, and then pivoted directly to Ethan. The way some men do, turning away from a woman in a room as if she's furniture. As if she has nothing to contribute to whatever conversation is about to happen. "I was in the neighborhood," Farrell said. "Thought I'd try one of your pastries before I make a decision on the account." Ethan started to speak, but Lily was already setting a small plate on the counter. She'd put together 3 items: a croissant, a small piece of their new honey almond tart, and one of the lemon poppy seed muffins, from a new batch she'd adjusted the recipe on that morning. "The croissant is our standard wholesale item," she said, addressing Farrell directly, her voice steady and professional. "We do 12-hour lamination, which gives you a better shelf window than most commercial suppliers. The tart is new developed this week. It pairs well with a coffee service, if any of your locations do brunch. And the muffin is the same recipe your pastry chef ordered for the Henderson event last March." Farrell stopped, turned toward her properly for the first time. "How do you know about the Henderson event?" "Because Gary Holt was at that event and he ordered a dozen of those muffins the following week," she said. "He's been ordering them every Friday since. I called him Tuesday to confirm his standing order and he mentioned it." She paused. "The people who love your product talk about where they had it first. That's the best market research a small bakery has." Farrell looked at the plate, then at Lily, then at Ethan. He picked up the croissant and bit into it. The expression on his face shifted, the kind of involuntary shift that happens before a person's professional mask can catch up with their actual reaction. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What are your wholesale minimums?" Ethan named a number. Lily immediately said, "That's the small account rate. For 3 restaurant locations on a weekly standing order. We can offer volume pricing." She named a different number lower per unit, structured in a way that still made sense for the bakery's margin. A structure Ethan hadn't even worked out yet, but that she'd apparently run in her head while standing at the display case. Farrell looked at her for a long moment. "You worked out volume pricing already?" "I assumed you'd ask," she said. "You didn't come in to eat a muffin, Mr. Farrell. You came in to make a decision. I just wanted to make sure you had what you needed to make it." Farrell was quiet for a moment. Then he did something Ethan had never seen him do in 2 years of attempted business conversations. He laughed. A real one, surprised out of him. "All right," he said, "let's talk terms." Later that evening, after Farrell had left with a signed agreement for a trial wholesale order starting the following Monday, Ethan leaned against the back counter and looked at Lily, who was cleaning down the prep table with the methodical focus she brought to everything. "Where did that pricing structure come from?" he said. "I worked it out Sunday night," she said. "I looked at your cost records from the binder, the ones that were legible, and ran the numbers on what volume pricing would need to look like to be worth your while without pricing you out of the conversation. On Sunday night." It wasn't complicated, Lily. He waited until she looked at him. "You worked out a wholesale pricing model for my bakery on your day off, before your first week had even started." She held his gaze for a moment. "I don't do jobs halfway, Mr. Walker. I never have." Something moved across her face, then brief, like a shadow, and she looked back down at the prep table. "People have given me a lot of reasons to prove that over the years." He wanted to ask what she meant. He didn't, not yet, but he filed it away. The way she said it, the particular weight of that sentence. He was beginning to understand that Lily Carter had a history that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with why she walked into his bakery that rainy Tuesday morning with her folder pressed against her chest like armor. Sophie met Lily on Friday afternoon. Ethan had arranged it carefully. Or tried to. He'd told Sophie he had a new employee. Told her she might stop by after school. Tried to frame it as casual and low stakes, which was exactly how Sophie treated absolutely nothing. She arrived at the bakery at 3:15 with her backpack and her evaluating gaze, and she stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching Lily frost a batch of cupcakes for a Saturday order. Lily looked up. "You must be Sophie." Sophie studied her. "You know who I am? Your dad talks about you," Lily said. She went back to frosting. "He mentioned you're the one who locks the back door when he forgets." Sophie looked at Ethan. Back at Lily. "He told you that?" "He told me a lot of things this week," Lily said. "Most of them were about what a disaster he is. Some of them were about you." She glanced up again. "He didn't make the disaster sound like a problem when he was talking about you. He just sounded proud." Sophie was quiet for a moment. That was unusual. Sophie was almost never quiet. "Can I help?" Sophie said. "With the frosting?" Lily looked at her for a moment, then moved slightly to one side and handed Sophie a second spatula. "Have you done this before?" Lily asked. "A little. Dad lets me help sometimes." "Your dad does a lot of things approximately," Lily said. And the dry precision of it made Sophie burst out laughing, a real, delighted laugh. The kind Ethan hadn't heard from her in a while. He stood in the doorway of the kitchen watching the two of them work, side by side at the prep table. Sophie's small shoulder almost touching Lily's arm. Lily showing her how to angle the spatula. Not taking over, not doing it for her, just guiding. Sophie asking a question. Lily answering it seriously. The way Sophie demanded to be taken seriously. Something happened in Ethan's chest watching that. Something quiet and complicated that he was not prepared to examine yet. He went back out front and pretended to restock the display case and told himself he wasn't thinking about it. The second week brought the first real confrontation. It came from a source Ethan hadn't anticipated. His own brother. Ryan Walker came into the bakery. On Tuesday morning he drove in from Boulder occasionally. Usually unannounced. Usually when he had opinions he wanted to deliver in person. He was 2 years older than Ethan, and he meant well. Genuinely. But his particular brand of meaning well had always involved a lot of words and very little listening. Ryan walked in. Saw Lily behind the counter serving a customer, watched her for a moment, and then caught Ethan in the back and said, low enough that he thought she couldn't hear, "Who's the new girl?" "Her name is Lily," Ethan said. "She's my operations manager." Ryan paused, choosing words. "That's who you hired." Ethan looked at him. "Yes. I'm just saying. You could have brought someone in with more I don't know. Presence. Someone who looks the part." Ethan set down the tray he was holding. "Looks the part how?" Ryan shrugged. "You know what I mean." "Say it clearly," Ethan said. "I want to hear you say it clearly." Ryan shifted. "I'm just thinking about the image of the place. You're trying to attract new accounts. You want someone out front who, what?" Ethan's voice was quiet, not loud. Controlled. The kind of quiet that's more dangerous than loud. "Who fits your idea of what a business looks like?" She secured the Farrell account in 20 minutes on her fourth day. She reworked our entire order system. She identified a calibration problem with the refrigerator that the repairman missed. She developed a wholesale pricing model on her Sunday off before her first week started. He picked the tray back up. What exactly does presence mean to you, Ryan? Because from where I'm standing, she has more of it than anyone who's walked through that door in 5 years. Ryan was quiet. She can probably hear this conversation, Ethan added. Ryan looked toward the front of the bakery. Lily was still at the counter, talking to a customer, not visibly reacting, though the straightness of her back had shifted slightly. I didn't mean anything by it, Ryan said. You meant everything by it, Ethan said. And she's heard it before. She's going to hear it again. The difference is that in this bakery, she's not going to hear it from me, and she's not going to hear it from anyone I let stand in my kitchen. He met his brother's eyes. We clear? Ryan left 20 minutes later, with a box of pastries he'd bought for an apology he didn't know how to say out loud. Lily didn't mention the conversation that day. She mentioned it 3 days later, when it was just the two of them in the kitchen at the end of a Friday, cleaning down before close. She said it casually, not looking at him, wiping down the prep table. You didn't have to do that, she said. With your brother. Yes, I did, Ethan said. He's family. You don't have to, Lily. He stopped what he was doing. She kept wiping the table. You hear comments like that constantly, don't you? People looking at you and making a calculation before you've said a word. She was quiet for a moment. I've learned to work around it. That's not the same as it being okay. She stopped wiping the table. She stood very still for a moment, and he could see her deciding something. When I was 23, she said, I was running the morning shift at a commercial kitchen in Denver. I knew that kitchen better than anyone in the building, the scheduling, the suppliers, the workflow, all of it. My manager at the time brought in a consultant to improve operations. She paused. The consultant walked in, looked around, looked at me, and then asked my manager, who was actually running the morning shift. He was looking directly at me when he asked. He just didn't. She exhaled once. He just didn't see me as the answer to that question. Ethan didn't say anything. I've been in rooms where people looked past me my whole career, she said. I learned to walk in anyway, to do the work anyway, to be better than the assumption. Every single time. She finally looked at him. But it's exhausting. Being better than what people assume you are every day. With every person, in every room. It's exhausting in a way that doesn't show up on a resume. He held her gaze. I know I can't undo the way I spoke to you that first morning. No, she said. You can't. But I want you to know that what you just described, that's not what happens in this bakery. Not while I'm here. She looked at him for a long moment. And something in her face shifted, not softening exactly, but opening. Like a door that had been locked for a long time, and someone had finally found the right key. Okay, she said. She went back to wiping the table, and Ethan went back to restocking the supply shelf. And neither of them said anything else. But the silence between them felt different than it had 3 weeks ago. Less like a wall, more like an understanding. By the end of the first month, the bakery's numbers had shifted visibly. Not dramatically, not overnight, but with the particular momentum of small things done correctly accumulating into something measurable. The Farrell account brought in consistent wholesale income. The new order system meant nothing, was being forgotten. Lily had reached out to 4 previous customers who had quietly stopped coming in, identified through the old receipt rate records in the binder, cross-referenced against recent transaction data, and of those 4, 3 had come back. One of them, an older woman named Helen Marsh, came in specifically and asked for Lily. I heard you were the one who called, Helen said. You wanted to know why I stopped coming in. I did, Lily said. You were a regular for almost 2 years. I wanted to understand. Nobody ever asked before, Helen said. She seemed slightly stunned by this. The last time I came in, my order was wrong. I didn't say anything. I just stopped coming back. I'm sorry about that, Lily said. That was before my time. But it shouldn't have happened. What was the order? Helen told her. Lily remembered it. She had seen the repeat order in the old records. had noted the gap in purchases. She went in the back and came out 10 minutes later with a small box. "This is what you used to order," she said. "The recipe is exactly the same. I'd like you to have it on us today, if that's all right." Helen looked at the box, looked at Lily, and this 70-year-old woman. This regular customer who had quietly disappeared because she felt like her order didn't matter. Said, "You know, I'll tell my whole book club about this place." She did. The following Tuesday, 6 women came in together and spent 45 minutes at the corner table and collectively ordered more than any single transaction that day. Ethan watched all of this happen, and he thought about what Lily had said in the kitchen that Friday about being exhausted by the work of being better than what people assumed. He thought about her walking into his bakery on that first rainy Tuesday morning with her folder and her composure, and the careful armor of someone who had learned, through years of being looked past, that she had to be twice as prepared, twice as competent, twice as ready. He thought about how he had looked at her exhausted, distracted, drowning in his own mess, and said 7 words that told her exactly what kind of person he was. And he thought about how she had walked back to that counter, anyway, had handed him a second chance he hadn't earned. Had done it because she was the kind of person who knew her own value well enough not to let someone else's carelessness define the room she walked into. He was, genuinely and without reservation, in awe of her. He wasn't going to say that out loud. Not yet. It was too early, and the ground between them was still too new, but he thought it. Standing behind the counter on a Thursday afternoon, watching her explain to Sophie, who had become a permanent after-school fixture in the bakery, the proper way to test if bread dough had proofed correctly. Sophie's small hands pressed into the dough, following Lily's instructions with the focused intensity she gave to everything. Ethan thought, "I almost turned this woman away," and the thought was staggering to him, not just because of what she'd done for the bakery in 30 days, but because of what it said about the assumptions he'd been operating on. For 5 years, the slow calcification of grief into habit, of loneliness into a kind of blindness. He'd been so certain he knew what he needed, so certain he knew what help looked like, so certain he could see what was right in front of him. He'd been wrong about all of it. He was beginning to understand that being wrong about Lily Carter was the best thing that had happened to him in a long time. Sophie pressed her fingers into the dough and looked up. "It bounced back," she said, "like you said it would." "That means it's ready," Lily said. "How does it know?" Sophie asked. Lily thought about this. "Because it's been through the process," she said. "It got stretched and worked and it rested, and now it's strong enough to hold its shape when something pushes on it." She glanced at Sophie. "Things work like that sometimes. People too." Sophie considered this with the gravity she gave all important information. Ethan pretended not to have heard it, but he heard every word. 6 weeks in, and Ethan Walker started doing something he hadn't done in 5 years. He started looking forward to Tuesday mornings. Not because Tuesdays were special, not because anything dramatic happened on Tuesdays specifically, but because Lily's evening class ran late on Mondays, which meant she came in Tuesday mornings with 2 coffees instead of 1 and started bang at the place 2 blocks over. The one with the good dark roast, and she'd set one on the counter near the register without saying anything about it, without making it a gesture, without expecting acknowledgement. Just coffee. Just there. The way people do things for other people when they've started paying attention to them without realizing they started paying attention. Ethan noticed. He noticed everything about Lily now, which was its own kind of problem that he was not yet ready to name. He noticed the way she hummed when she was working through a problem, not a song exactly. Just a low sound that meant her brain was moving. He noticed she always checked on the proofing dough before she did anything else in the morning, even before she took off her jacket. He noticed she had a habit of pressing her thumbnail against her finger when a customer said something that frustrated her. A small, invisible release valve that most people would never catch. He caught it every time, and he noticed this one bothered him more than the others. Sat with him longer that she never talked about her personal life. Not once in 6 weeks. She knew he was a widower. She knew about Sophie, About Claire in the broad strokes, about the weight of the last 5 years. She'd absorbed all of that naturally, the way you absorb things about people you spend 8 hours a day with. But she offered nothing in return. Not a mention of family, not a reference to friends. Not a single story that started with the words, "when I was a kid," or, "my mother always said." She was present. She was warm. She was, in every measurable way, more alive in that kitchen than anyone Ethan had ever worked beside. But there was a door she kept closed. And Ethan Walker, who had his own closed doors, recognized one immediately. It was Sophie who found the crack in it first. They were in the kitchen on a Thursday afternoon. Late November, now, the holiday order season just beginning to make itself felt in the volume of calls and the particular stress that descended on small bakeries between Thanksgiving and New Year's. Sophie was doing homework at the small table near the back wall. She'd claimed that table 3 weeks ago and nobody questioned it. And Lily was working through a test batch of a new holiday recipe, a cranberry orange shortbread she'd been developing for 2 weeks. Sophie looked up from her math worksheet. "Lily, do you have kids?" Lily kept working. "No. Do you want them?" "Sophie," Ethan said, from the other side of the kitchen. "I'm asking," Sophie said, unapologetically. "It's a normal question." Lily was quiet for a moment. She set down the spoon she was holding, looked at the shortbread dough, and said, "Someday. Maybe. If the timing is right." "My mom wanted more kids," Sophie said. The way she said it was direct and clear. The way children talk about grief, because they haven't yet learned to soften it. She told Dad she wanted 4, he wanted 2. They were still arguing about it when she died. The kitchen went very quiet. Ethan didn't move. Lily turned to look at Sophie slowly. "How do you know that?" "I heard them talking once. I was like 6. I didn't understand it then." Sophie looked back at her worksheet. "I thought about it later. I think they both would have been okay with whatever number." She shrugged one shoulder. "That's how you know people actually loved each other. They argue about stuff that doesn't matter." Lily looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, "That's one of the smartest things I've heard in a long time." Sophie accepted this without particular vanity. "I know." And then she went back to her math worksheet, and Lily stood at the prep table for a moment, very still, and Ethan watched her press her thumbnail against her index finger. That small, invisible gesture. And he understood it wasn't frustration this time. It was something else. Something that needed containing. He didn't say anything. He went back to what he was doing. But later, when Sophie had gone to the bathroom, and it was just the two of them, Lily said without looking up from the shortbread, "She's something else." "Your kid." "I know," Ethan said. I can't take credit for most of it." "Yes, you can," Lily said. "Kids don't get that kind of emotional clarity from nowhere. Somebody taught her that grief is allowed to be spoken out loud." She paused. "That's not nothing, Ethan." It was the first time she'd used his first name without the Mr. in front of it. Neither of them mentioned it. But he heard it. And she knew he heard it. And the kitchen held that small, significant shift between them without either of them acknowledging it. The way a room holds warmth after the heater's been turned off. The Thanksgiving orders nearly killed them both. That was not a metaphor. The volume that came in during the 2 weeks before Thanksgiving was more than the bakery had handled in any comparable period in the last 3 years. Partly because word had gotten around Helen Marsh's book club had become a genuine referral engine. And the Farrell account meant Walker Family Bakery was now showing up in the menus of 3 local restaurants, and partly because Lily had quietly, without making a production of it, placed small holiday order feature in the community newsletter that Ethan hadn't even known existed. By the Monday before Thanksgiving, they had 63 confirmed orders. Ethan stood in the kitchen, looking at the order board. Lily had installed on the wall a proper system, color-coded by date and priority, not his old system of post-it notes and quiet desperation, and he said, "We can't do all of these." "We can," Lily said. "Lily, 63 orders in 5 days with 2 people, 3 people," she said. "I called Vanessa." He stared at her. "Who is Vanessa?" "She's a baker I worked with in She's available this week. I've already offered her the hours." subject to your approval, which I need in the next 20 minutes because she has another offer. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it. You called someone before you asked me? I identified a problem and I found a solution, she said. I'm asking you now. Do you approve the hours? He looked at the order board. 63 orders. 5 days. 3 people. Yes, he said. Good. She was already texting. She starts tomorrow at 5. Vanessa turned out to be a compact, efficient woman in her 40s who worked with the kind of quiet speed that reminded Ethan of watching a professional athlete, everything economical. Nothing wasted, the result of 10,000 hours of practice that had settled into instinct. She and Lily worked together with the ease of people who had shared a kitchen before, communicating in the shorthand of people who trusted each other's competence. And Ethan found himself in the unfamiliar position of being the least efficient person in his own kitchen. He adapted. Lily showed him where to be useful without making him feel managed, which was a skill he was beginning to recognize as genuinely rare. She redirected him toward the tasks he was actually good at: the bread, the creative work, the customer-facing moments, and absorbed the logistics and coordination herself without comment, without keeping score. On Wednesday night at 9:30, when the last of the Wednesday orders were packed and boxed, and the 3 of them were sitting on the back step, eating leftover shortbread because nobody had stopped long enough to eat a real meal, Vanessa looked at Lily and said, "You didn't tell me he was like this." Lily looked up. "Like what?" Vanessa nodded at Ethan. "Like a real one." "Stop," Lily said. "I'm just saying what I see, Vanessa." Ethan looked between them. "Am I supposed to be offended?" "No," Vanessa said cheerfully. "You're supposed to be grateful that the woman sitting next to you has been holding this place together for 6 weeks and still shows up early every single day." She bit into her shortbread. "I've known Lily for 4 years. I've never seen her work this hard for a job. Usually she works hard because the work matters. This is different, Vanessa," Lily said again, with a specific quietness that closed the subject. Vanessa smiled and said nothing else. Ethan said nothing either. But he sat on that back step in the cold November air, eating cranberry-orange shortbread, and he thought about what Vanessa had said. About the distinction she'd drawn. Working hard because the work matters versus something different. He thought about Lily coming in at 5:45 on that first Monday, the coffee on Tuesday mornings, the Sunday night pricing structure, the way she'd stood next to Sophie at the prep table and said things work like that sometimes. People too. He was not an idiot. He knew what he was feeling. He'd been aware of it in the peripheral way. You're aware of something you're not ready to look at directly, like a light in your side vision that you keep not turning toward because turning toward it makes it real. He turned toward it, sitting on that back step. He was falling in love with Lily Carter, and he had absolutely no idea what to do with that information. The twist came on a Friday, 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, and it came from a direction nobody expected. A man walked into the bakery at 11 in the morning. He was around 40, well-dressed in the careful way of someone who wanted to be taken seriously. And he asked for the manager with the specific tone of someone who had rehearsed the conversation on the way over. Ethan came out from the back. "I'm looking for a Lily Carter," the man said. Ethan's expression didn't change. "Can I ask what this is regarding?" "My name is Marcus Webb," the man said. "I own Webb Hospitality Group. We have 4 hotels in Colorado, 2 in Utah. I'm looking to bring a pastry program in-house across all 6 properties." He paused. "I heard about Miss Carter through Dennis Farrell. He was very specific about her. I'd like to offer her a position." Ethan stood very still. "She's not available right now. I can wait. It might be a while. I have time." Webb sat down at one of the front tables and took out his phone and waited with the patience of a man who was accustomed to getting what he came for. Ethan went back into the kitchen. Lily was working on a cake order. He stood in the doorway for a moment. "There's someone out front," he said. "He says his name is Marcus Webb. He owns a hotel group. He wants to offer you a job." Lily's hands slowed. She didn't stop working. She finished the stroke she was making with the spatula, set it down carefully, and turned around. "What kind of job?" she said. "Pastry program director. 6 properties across 2 states. He said it evenly. Gave her everything. He says Farrell recommended you specifically. She was quiet for a moment, reading his face. She was good at that. She'd always been good at that. What do you want me to do? She said. I want you to talk to him, he said. It's your career. You don't need my permission. That's not what I asked you. He held her gaze. She was right. That wasn't what she asked. He said, honestly, I want you to stay. But I want you to stay because this is where you want to be, not because you don't know what else is out there. He paused. You should know what else is out there. Lily. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she untied her apron, set it on the hook by the kitchen door, and walked out front to meet Marcus Webb. Ethan went back to what he was doing. He did it with the focused concentration of a man not thinking about what was happening in the next room, which meant he was thinking about nothing else. He heard voices, not words, just the rhythm of conversation. Professional and measured. Webb's voice was confident, the kind of voice that was used to presenting compelling offers. Lily's voice was even, unhurried. 20 minutes later, she came back into the kitchen. She picked up her apron and tied it back on. Said nothing. Ethan waited. He offered me 40% more than you're paying me, she said. Ethan nodded. He'd expected something like that. With a benefits package and a relocation allowance if I wanted to move closer to the central office. That's a serious offer, he said. Yes. She picked up the spatula, looked at the cake. He also told me I'd be managing a team of 12 bakers across 6 locations, which means I'd spend most of my time in meetings and on the road, and very little time actually doing the thing I'm good at. Some people want that, Ethan said. The management track. I know. She started working again. I told him I'd think about it. He said nothing. She kept working. Then, without looking up, I'm not going to take it. Ethan exhaled. One breath. Slow and quiet. He didn't make a thing of it. Why, he said. She was quiet for a moment, long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then she said, because I spent 6 years being told I was better suited for behind-the-scenes work, kept away from the accounts, the client relationships, the decisions that actually mattered. Told, in ways big and small, that I should be grateful for whatever room I was allowed to be in. She set the spatula down, turned around, looked at him with the specific directness she'd had since that very first morning. And then I walked into this disaster of a bakery 6 weeks ago, and a man who didn't know me said something careless, and I almost walked out. A pause. But I didn't. And what I found here, what I built here, this is mine too. In a way that a job in a hotel, with a team of 12 people I don't know, in cities I don't live in, won't ever be. Ethan held her gaze. This bakery is yours too, he said, in every way that matters. She nodded once and went back to the cake, and Ethan went back to the bread. And Marcus Webb drove back to wherever he came from with a polite no and a referral to 2 other bakers Lily had written down for him on a note-card. Because that was the kind of person she was, even when she turned you down. She tried to be useful. The real crisis came on a Monday in December, and it arrived without warning the way the worst ones do. Ethan got the call at 6:45 in the morning. He was at the bakery. Sophie was at school. The voice on the phone was from Sophie's school, the school nurse. Calm and specific in the way of someone trained to deliver information without panic, saying that Sophie had collapsed during morning assembly. He was in his car before the sentence was finished. He left the bakery unlocked, left the oven on, left everything mid-process, because none of it mattered. None of it existed. The only thing in the world at that moment was the image of Sophie, his 8-year-old girl with the curly hair, and the evaluating gaze, and the alarm that played "You Are My Sunshine" falling. He got to the school in 4 minutes. Sophie was sitting up in the nurse's office when he arrived. She was pale, and she looked embarrassed, which was so exactly Sophie that Ethan felt something in his chest release. She was embarrassed. She was conscious and alert and embarrassed, which meant she was okay, which meant the world still made sense. It was hot, Sophie said, before he'd fully gotten through the door. Assembly is always hot. Mrs. Palmer said, I should have eaten more breakfast. You should have eaten more breakfast, Ethan said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. I know. I was going to eat after the assembly. That's not how breakfast works. I know that now. She was watching him. The evaluating gaze. Even now, even pale and sitting on a nurse's table. Dad, I'm fine. I know you're fine. You look like you're not fine, Sophie. He sat down next to her on the bench, put his arm around her. She leaned into him, without the resistance she usually had at 8. At the age where showing you need a parent was beginning to feel like admitting something. She leaned right in, and his arm tightened around her, and he pressed his face against the top of her head and thought about how there was no distance at all between loving someone and being completely terrified for them. Your hands are shaking, Sophie said quietly. I know, I'm really okay, I know that too. They sat like that for a moment. Then Sophie said, Did you call Lily? He lifted his head. What? The bakery. You left everything. Did you call her? He hadn't. He'd left without thinking about the bakery at all, which told him something about what the bakery meant versus what Sophie meant. A calculation that wasn't even a calculation, not really. But he'd also left the oven on. He pulled out his phone. Lily answered on the second ring. I'm at Sophie's school, he said. She's okay. But I left the oven on, and the back door probably isn't locked, and I don't know what state I'm already here, Lily said. He stopped. What? The school called the bakery first, she said. Couldn't reach your cell. I'm already here. Ovens are off. Door is locked. I've pushed the morning orders back by an hour and contacted the 2 customers who were scheduled for pickup before 9. A pause. Is she actually okay? She is. Low blood sugar. Probably. She didn't eat enough. Okay. He could hear her breathing. Stay with her. I've got this. He stayed at the school with Sophie for 2 hours, had her eat a full breakfast from the vending machine, a compromise they both accepted. Talked to the nurse. Talked to Sophie's teacher. Listened to Sophie explain at length why the gymnasium was poorly ventilated, which was almost certainly true. When they got back to the bakery at noon, Sophie walked in ahead of him and Lily was behind the counter, and Sophie went directly to her and said, without preamble, I fainted. I heard, Lily said. It was embarrassing. It happens to everyone at some point. Did it happen to you? Once, Lily said, in the middle of a catering event for 200 people. I was on my feet for 14 hours, and I hadn't eaten since breakfast. Sophie at her in front of 200 people? In front of 200 people, Lily confirmed. And a wedding party. And the photographer. Sophie looked at her for a long moment. That's worse than mine. Significantly, Lily said. How are you feeling better? I ate peanut butter crackers and orange juice. Good combination. She nodded at the stool behind the counter. You can sit there for the afternoon if you want. But you have to eat the sandwich I made. Sophie's eyes went to the paper bag on the shelf below the counter. You made me a sandwich? I had 20 minutes, Lily said simply. Turkey and Swiss. No mustard. Because your dad mentioned you don't like it. Sophie sat down on the stool, opened the bag, looked inside it. Then she looked up at Lily with an expression that was 8 years old and absolutely unguarded. The expression of a child who has learned not to need things and is suddenly, unexpectedly faced with being given one. Thank you, she said. And her voice was small and real and had nothing performing in it. Lily said, Of course, and went back to work. Ethan watched this from the doorway. He watched his daughter eat the sandwich that Lily had made in 20 minutes between managing his bakery and fielding his phone calls, and holding everything together while he sat in a school nurse's office with his hands shaking. He thought about what Vanessa had said on the back step in November. About the distinction. About something different. He thought about a man who 5 years ago had lost his wife and nearly lost himself and had walked through every day since on willpower and routine and the specific love of an 8-year-old girl who locked the back door at midnight and lectured him. About breakfast. And he thought about a woman who had walked into his bakery through the rain with a folder pressed against her chest like armor and said, Judge me by my work, not by your assumptions. He thought about all of it, and then he walked into the bakery and got back to work, because there were orders to fill and customers to serve, and none of what he was feeling was going to get solved standing in a doorway. But it was going to have to get addressed. He knew that now. It was going to have to be addressed soon. The crisis that Ethan had been unconsciously bracing for, not the one with Sophie, not the school call, but the one he'd felt coming in the way you feel weather before it arrives, came on a Friday afternoon in mid-December. A man walked into the bakery, and Lily went absolutely still. Not the subtle stillness she used when a customer said something that required her invisible release valve. This was different. This was the stillness of someone who has seen something they weren't prepared to see and whose entire body is making the decision about what to do next. Ethan was behind the counter. He noticed because he always noticed now. The man was around 35, reasonably good-looking, wearing a jacket that said money without being obvious about it. He stood at the counter and looked at the display case, and then looked at Lily. And his expression did something complicated: recognition. And then something else underneath it that Ethan couldn't immediately name. Lily, the man said. Derek, she said. Just the name. Nothing around it. Ethan looked between them and understood immediately that this was someone from her life before. Someone significant. Someone the door had been keeping out. Derek looked around the bakery. So this is where you ended up. This is where I work, she said. Her voice was flat and precise. Not cold exactly, but stripped of anything that could be used against her. It's nice, he said. In the way people say nice when they mean small. Can I help you with something? She said. I was in the area. He paused. Looked at her. You look good. Lily. Thank you. Was there something you wanted to order? Derek's jaw tightened slightly. He wasn't used to being redirected like this. That was clear. I heard you turn down the web offer. Lily went very still. How did you hear about that? Marcus is a friend. He mentioned he'd tried to recruit someone from a bakery out here. Said she was sharp. A pause. I figured it was you. Did you want to order something? She said again. I wanted to see how you were doing. I'm working, she said. So I'm doing well. Derek looked at her for a long moment. Then his eyes moved to Ethan, a look that assessed and categorized and decided something. All in about 3 seconds. You work for him? I work here, Lily said. Right, he put his hands in his pockets. You know? When you left Denver, everyone assumed you'd come back. When things got hard. Things didn't get hard, she said quietly. Things got clear. Derek had absorbed that. Nodded slowly. I heard the Mercer place closed, he said. The one that passed you over. Something moved across Lily's face. Brief and controlled. I hadn't heard that, she said. 3 months ago. The owner overextended. Brought in the wrong people for the wrong reasons. He looked at her. You probably would have saved it. If they'd had the sense to hire you. Lily said nothing. Ethan, who had been wiping down a portion of the counter and doing an exceptionally poor job of pretending not to listen, set down the cloth and said evenly, Can I get you something? Coffee, maybe? Derek looked at him, took the redirect. Sure. Black. Ethan poured it. Set it on the counter. Derek picked it up, took a sip and said to Lily, I owe you an apology. The bakery was quiet. You don't have to, she started. I do, he said. When I told you that you weren't ready for the promotions, I was wrong. And I knew I was wrong when I said it. I said it anyway because I was scared of what it would mean if you got there before I did. He looked at his coffee. That's not something I'm proud of. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Ethan could see her processing it, not just the words, but the years behind the words. The weight of being told by someone you trusted that you weren't ready when you were more ready than anyone in the room. Okay, she said finally. Okay? Derek repeated. Okay, she said again. I appreciate you saying it. But Derek, I already knew. I knew it when you said it. She held his gaze steadily. I spent 2 years after that, wondering if you were right. Trying to figure out if there was something about me that I couldn't see. Some reason I kept getting passed over that I just wasn't understanding. She paused, and then I stopped wondering. Because the answer was never about me. Derek looked at her. He had nothing to say to that, which might have been the first honest moment of the conversation. He finished his coffee, set the cup down. You built something real here, he said quietly. He meant it. That much was visible. Yes, she said. I did, he nodded. Put on his jacket. Left. And Lily stood behind the counter for a moment. Perfectly still after the door closed. Then Ethan said, "Who was he?" "Old manager," she said. "He decided I wasn't ready for a senior position 3 years ago. I found out later he'd recommended 2 other people with less experience than me." She exhaled. "He was also, briefly, someone I thought I could trust." Those 2 things overlapped, which is its own kind of complicated. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "Don't be." She looked at him. He was right about one thing. I built something real here. A pause. That's not nothing. Ethan looked at her. At the woman who had walked through his door, through the rain with her armor and her folder, and her absolute refusal to be less than what she was. Regardless of who was looking. "No," he said. "It's not nothing." And it was right then, with the December light coming through the front window, and Sophie doing homework at her table in the back, and the smell of cranberry orange shortbread in the air, and the ghost of a man who had underestimated Lily Carter, just walking out the door. It was right then that Ethan Walker made a decision. He wasn't going to wait anymore. He wasn't going to stand in doorways, watching what he felt, and doing nothing about it. He was going to say something. Not today. Not right now. Not with the weight of Derek's visit still in the room. Not with Sophie in the back needing dinner and the Friday orders needing to go out. But soon. Before Christmas. He decided. Before Christmas. He didn't say it before Christmas. Not because he lost his nerve, though he did. Twice. In specific moments he would later catalog with the precise embarrassment of a man who knows exactly when he failed himself. He lost it the first time on December 19th. A Tuesday, when Lily set the coffee on the counter near the register the way she always did and looked up at him with those direct brown eyes and said good morning like she meant it. Like every morning was something she'd decided to show up for. And he opened his mouth and said, "Good morning" back, and nothing else. Because the moment was too ordinary and too perfect at the same time, and he didn't know how to step into it without breaking it leakant. He lost it the second time on December 22nd. When they were the last 2 in the bakery after a brutal 10-hour day of holiday orders, and Sophie was asleep on the couch in the back office. A situation that had become so regular it barely warranted comment anymore. And Lily was sitting on the counter, eating the last of a batch of failed macarons, failed by her standards. Which meant they were merely very good instead of perfect. And she was reading something on her phone and laughing quietly to herself. And Ethan stood in the doorway of the kitchen and looked at her and thought, I am completely done pretending this is something other than what it is. And then his phone rang. A customer with an urgent order question. And by the time he got off the call, Lily had cleaned up the macaron plate and put her jacket on, and said goodnight and was gone. Christmas came and went. Ethan spent it with Sophie at his parents' place in Boulder. The way they did every year, the particular performance of normalcy that became easier with repetition. His mother asked about the bakery. He told her about the Farrell account, about the holiday order numbers, about the revenue shift. She listened and then said, with the specific precision of a woman who missed nothing. And the woman? The one Sophie keeps talking about? Sophie, across the room, did not look up from her book. Lily, Ethan said. She's my operations manager. Sophie says she makes the best shortbread she's ever had. She does. Sophie also says she makes Dad smile in the morning before he's had his coffee. Ethan looked at his daughter. Sophie turned a page. She's a good employee, Ethan said. His mother looked at him the way mothers look at their adult children when they're being deliberately obtuse. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. He drove back to Denver the day after Christmas, and he made a decision. Not the same decision he'd made in December. That one had been about intention. This one was about action. He was going to say something. He was going to stop waiting for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment had already happened approximately 11 times, and he'd missed every one of them. He was going to speak on New Year's. The bakery was closed New Year's Eve. It had always been closed. It was one of the few days in the year Ethan held as genuinely non-negotiable. He'd called Lily the day after Christmas and asked her, carefully, if she had plans. She'd paused. Why? Sophie wants to do a New Year's Eve thing, he said. She wants to bake. She asked specifically if you'd come. He paused. I want you to come too. Not as an employee. Just I want you to come. The pause on her end was long enough that he thought he'd miscalibrated something. Then she said, What time? 7, he said. We're doing Sophie's choice for dinner. Which means tacos, and then baking until midnight. That sounds like Sophie. It is completely Sophie. Another pause. Smaller this time. Okay, she said. I'll be there. He spent the rest of that day finding 2 separate occasions to almost call her back and cancel on the grounds that he had no idea what he was doing. And on both occasions, he put his phone down and made himself move away from it before he could make contact. She arrived at 7 with a bottle of sparkling cider and a bag of specialty chocolate she said was for a ganache she'd been wanting to try on Sophie. And Sophie met her at the door and hugged her, which was not something Sophie did casually. She hugged with intention. Only when she meant it, and Ethan stood in the hall and watched his daughter hug Lily like she'd been doing it for years, and felt something in his chest that he was tired of not naming. They made tacos. Sophie narrated her methodology as if presenting a cooking show. Lily listened with the focused attention she gave everything, and asked questions that made Sophie increasingly delighted. Ethan cooked the meat and listened to the 2 of them and thought about nothing except what was in front of him, which was a luxury he'd forgotten he was allowed. After dinner, Sophie put on music her current playlist, which was an eclectic mix of things she decided were classics based on criteria nobody fully understood, and they baked. Sophie's idea was sugar cookies with ganache, which was ambitious for an 8-year-old's project, but Lily made it work, guiding Sophie through the ganache without taking it over, letting Sophie make the mistakes and correct them, letting her have the whole experience of it. By 10:30, Sophie was starting to fade. She was fighting it with everything she had. She had an absolute ideological opposition to admitting she was tired, but Ethan could see it. The slower movements, the increased commentary about how she was not at all tired. At 10:55, Sophie was asleep on the couch. She'd made it to 10:55. Ethan covered her with a blanket from the back of the couch and stood there looking at her for a moment, her dark curly hair spread out, her mouth slightly open, her whole 8-year-old self completely surrendered to sleep, and then he walked back to the kitchen. Lily was washing up at the sink. She'd already put away the baking supplies, already wrapped and covered the cookies, already done the work without being asked. She always did the work without being asked. He stood in the doorway. Lily, he said. She turned off the water, turned around. Read his expression the way she always did, with that particular directness that missed nothing. She waited. I've been trying to say something to you for about 6 weeks, he said. And I keep not saying it because I keep talking myself out of it. Because you work for me, and that's complicated, and you've already had enough people in your life who confused what they needed with what you deserved. And I don't want to be another one of those people. He stopped, steadied himself. But I also think that not saying it is its own kind of dishonesty, and you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfortable silence. Lily said nothing. She was watching him with her arms loosely crossed. Not defensive, just listening. I think you're extraordinary, he said. Not because you saved the bakery, though you did. Not because Sophie loves you, though she does. Because of who you are. The way you move through the world, the way you walk into rooms that don't deserve you, and build something real in them anyway. He held her gaze. I'm in love with you. And I realize the timing is complicated, and the situation is complicated, and if you need me to be your employer and nothing else, I will figure out how to do that, and I will not make it strange. But I couldn't go into a new year with that unsaid. The kitchen was very quiet. Lily uncrossed her arms. She looked at him for a moment that lasted long enough for him to hear his own heartbeat. You talked yourself out of saying that for 6 weeks, she said. Yes. You lost a lot of good moments, I know. The Tuesday mornings, she said. The coffee. He blinked. What about them? I started bringing 2 coffees in October, she said. You never asked why I started doing that. He hadn't. He'd just accepted it. Quietly. Gratefully, the way you accept things that feel like they've always been there. Why did you start doing that? He said. Because you looked like you needed someone to think about you before you started thinking about everyone else, she said. Because you're the kind of person who takes care of everything except himself. And because I wanted to be the person who noticed that. She looked at him directly. The way she always looked at him, no performance. No armor, just Lily. I've been falling in love with you since the day you stepped around that counter and said wait. Since the day you defended me to your brother, like it was the only natural thing to do. Since the day you left your bakery on fire to get to Sophie, and then called me in the same breath because, even in a crisis, you didn't want me left without information. Ethan stood very still. You're the first person in a long time, she said quietly, who saw what I could do and responded by making more space for it instead of less. She paused. That's not a small thing, Ethan. For someone who's spent her whole career being made smaller, that's not a small thing at all. He crossed the kitchen. He didn't say anything else. He took her face in both hands. The way a man holds something he's been afraid to want. And he kissed her. She kissed him back without hesitation. With the same directness she brought to everything. And it was nothing like the tentative, uncertain thing he'd been bracing for. It was clear. It was decided. When they pulled back, she was looking at him. Happy New Year, she said. It's only 11:15, he said. Head start, she said. I'm always early. He laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that comes from somewhere real. And she smiled, that small, genuine smile, not the professional one. The one he'd been waiting to see since October. And he thought about all the ways his life had broken open in the last 3 months and decided that broken open was the right phrase for it. Not broken down. Broken open. Like bread that's proofed correctly and goes into heat and opens along the scoreline exactly as intended. The way things work when you've been through the process. January came in hard and fast. The bakery's numbers for December came in, and they were the best single month the business had recorded in 4 years. Ethan sat with the figures at the counter on a Monday morning and looked at them the way you look at something you weren't sure was possible. The Farrell account alone had contributed nearly 18% of December's revenue. The holiday orders, 63 of them. All delivered, none failed, had brought in 17 new customers who had placed post-holiday orders in the first week of January. Helen Marsh's book club had become a genuine community institution, meeting at the bakery every other Tuesday. Lily sat across from him with her own copy of the figures. You know what this means, she said. We had a good month. We had a good quarter, she said. December alone puts you in a position to do something you haven't been able to do. She slid a piece of paper across the counter. She'd done the analysis already. The way she always had analysis ready before he knew he needed it. You can expand the product line. Add a dedicated wholesale kitchen if you want. Or, she paused, you can bring me in as a partner. He looked up. Not an employee, she said. A partner. I put in capital. I take equity. We structure it properly with an attorney. The bakery becomes ours instead of yours with me working in it. She held his gaze. I want to build something. I've been building it for 3 months. I want my name on it. He looked at her. At the figures, at the paper. You want to invest in this bakery, he said. I want to invest in this bakery can become, she said. Those are different things. And you know I see what it can become. You've seen how I work. He'd seen nothing but how she worked for 3 months. This is separate from us, she said. I need you to understand that. This is a business decision. I'm not asking because of what happened New Year's Eve. I'm asking because the numbers are right and the timing is right, and I know this business better than anyone except you. A pause. If we were strangers, would you say yes? He looked at the numbers, the figures she'd compiled, the growth trajectory she'd charted on the second page. Conservative estimates and optimistic ones, both grounded in actual data. If we were strangers, he said, I'd have said yes in October. She nodded once. Then let's get an attorney, he said. They had the partnership agreement drawn up in 3 weeks. The attorney, a methodical woman named Patricia, who had been doing small business law in Denver for 20 years, reviewed the structure twice and told them both separately that it was one of the cleaner partnership setups she'd seen in recent memory. Equal operational authority. Equitable revenue split adjusted for initial capital contributions. A buyout clause that protected both of them if anything changed. Patricia had looked at them both in her office and said, with the professional neutrality of someone who had seen every version of this situation, I want to be clear that I'm representing the business partnership here. If there are personal dimensions to this arrangement, those need their own counsel. Understood, Licia said. We're clear, Ethan said. Patricia nodded and moved on. In the car afterward, Lily said. She knew. Everyone knows, Ethan said. We haven't told anyone. Sophie told everyone, he said. Lily looked at him. Sophie doesn't know. Sophie knows everything, he said. She's known since November. She just hasn't said anything because she's waiting for us to figure it out ourselves. He paused. She told my mother at Christmas that Lily makes Dad smile before coffee. My mother had the exact expression Patricia just had. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I like your mother. You've never met my mother. I'm going to like her. He glanced at her. That sounds like you're planning to meet her. I'm always planning, she said. He smiled. Kept driving. The bakery sign changed on a Thursday in February. It wasn't dramatic. It was a man with a van and a new sign and about 45 minutes of installation. But Ethan stood on the sidewalk and watched Walker Family Bakery become Walker and Carter Family Bakery and felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Not happiness exactly. Though he was happy. Something more structural than that. Something that had to do with the future to looking like something worth building toward. Instead of something he was just enduring. Sophie stood next to him. She looked at the sign for a long moment. Carter, she said. Carter, he confirmed. That's Lily's name, it is. Sophie looked at the sign. Then at her father. Is she going to have a different name soon? Ethan looked at his daughter. What? I'm just asking, Sophie said. The evaluating gaze. Completely innocent. Completely not innocent at all. That is a very large question for a Thursday morning, Ethan said. I know, Sophie said. I just want to be prepared. He put his arm around her. Let's go inside. That means you're thinking about it, Sophie said. Inside, he said. She went inside. Satisfied. The investor showed up in March. His name was Richard Calloway. And he arrived on a Wednesday afternoon with the energy of a man who had decided something before he walked in the door. He was 60. Prosperous, the kind of man who owned things and was accustomed to the weight of that. He'd heard about the bakery through a chain of connections that traced back to Dennis Farrell, who had apparently been recommending the bakery to everyone he knew since November. Calloway introduced himself to Ethan, shook his hand, and then turned to look at Lily, who was managing a customer at the far end of the counter, with an expression that took its time deciding what it was seeing. She runs the kitchen, he said to Ethan. She co-owns the business, Ethan said. Calloway raised an eyebrow. Co-owns. Equal partner, Ethan said. Has been since February. Calloway absorbed this. He looked at the bakery, the organized display case, the clearly systematized operation, the small crowd of midday customers, and then he looked at Lily again. More carefully this time. She had finished with her customer. She walked over and introduced herself and shook his hand and looked at him with those direct brown eyes. And Calloway, to his credit, shifted his posture in a way that acknowledged something. Dennis Farrell says you renegotiated his wholesale terms twice in 4 months, and he came back both times, Calloway said to her. He came back because the product is worth the price, Lily said. I just made sure the price was correct. Calloway almost smiled. What's your vision for this place? Expansion, she said. Not in size. In reach. We have a signature product line that's ready to scale to retail. Specialty grocery. Initially. Regional first, then evaluate. She paused. We have the recipe quality and the brand identity. What we need is a production facility and a distribution relationship. Calloway looked at her. You've already mapped this out. I've been mapping it since January, she said. Have you looked at production spaces? 3 of them, she said. I can send you the evaluations. He looked at Ethan. Does she speak for the business? We both do, Ethan said, equally. Calloway looked back at Lily. He studied her for a moment with the particular attention of someone recalibrating. Then let's sit down, he said. They sat for 2 hours. Lily walked Calloway through the business case with the precision and confidence of someone who had been living in those numbers for months. Because she had been, she answered every question directly. She pushed back one, a term he proposed, that would have given him more operational influence than the investment warranted. And once on a timeline that she said underestimated the production ramp-up by 30%. Both times she was specific, unapologetic, and correct. Calloway looked at her after the second pushback. You've done this before, he said. No, she said. But I've been in rooms where people made these mistakes and I watched them happen. She met his gaze. I wasn't going to make them for you. Calloway was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I want to invest. He named a number. Lily looked at Ethan. A glance that lasted half a second and communicated everything, not asking permission. Checking alignment. Verifying that they were looking at the same thing from the same direction. Ethan nodded. Lily looked back at Calloway. We'd like to review the terms with our attorney before confirming. We can have a response to you by end of week. That's reasonable, Calloway said. He stood to leave. He shook Ethan's hand. Then he shook Lily's hand. And this time the handshake was different from the first one, the beginning of the meeting, versus the end of it. The before and after of 2 hours in a room with Lily Carter, he said. Farrell told me this bakery had changed. He didn't tell me why. He looked at Lily. Now I know, he said. He left. The bakery was quiet for a moment after the door closed. Then Lily exhaled, one breath, slow, and Ethan saw her hands, which she had kept perfectly still the whole 2 hours. Release slightly. Your hands, he said quietly. I know, she said. You were nervous. I'm always nervous, she said. I just don't perform it. She looked at him. Is that okay? That's the most human thing you've ever said to me, he said. She looked at him for a moment, and then she laughed, a real one. Surprised out of her, the kind that doesn't have anything performing in it. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. She turned her hand over and held his back, and that was the moment, not the investment. Not the partnership agreement, not the sign on the building, but this, in the quiet aftermath of 2 hours of Lily Carter being extraordinary in a room that Ethan Walker understood completely what he had nearly thrown away on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. He had nearly said sorry. Goodbye, thank you for coming in. He had nearly let her walk out that door with her folder and her armor and her direct brown eyes. And he had nearly gone back to drowning alone in a bakery that was slowly sinking. Instead, he had said wait, one word, and she had turned around, and everything that followed: the coffee, the order system, the Farrell account, the holiday orders, the sign, the partnership, the 2 hours with Calloway, Sophie's sandwich, the New Year's Eve kitchen, all of it had grown from that one word. Wait. He thought about that, about how close it had been, about how many times the future hangs on a single moment that doesn't announce itself as significant, about how the best things in his life had always arrived looking like nothing in particular: an ordinary Tuesday, a rainy morning, a woman with a folder. Lily was looking at him. What are you thinking? She said. I'm thinking about that first morning, he said, about how close I came to not saying wait. She was quiet for a moment. I would have come back, she said. He looked at her. What? If you hadn't said it, she said. If I'd walked out, I would have come back. She paused. I drove past this bakery twice the week before I came in. I saw the ad and I researched the business, and I thought this is the kind of place that could be something. This is the kind of place worth walking into. She met his eyes. I would have found a reason to come back. He held her gaze. You never told me that, he said. You never asked, she said. He looked at her, at everything she was, at everything she'd brought into his bakery and his kitchen and his life and his daughter's life, all of it carried in under that folder like something she'd been saving up for a long time. Lily, he said. I know, she said softly. I haven't said it. You don't have to say it right now. I want to. She waited. Thank you, he said. For coming back. For staying. For building something here that was worth building. For being exactly who you are in every room you walk into. Even the rooms that don't deserve it. He paused. And for the Tuesday coffee. Every single one. She looked at him for a long moment with those direct brown eyes. Then she said, You're welcome. And she squeezed his hand. And outside, on the building that used to say Walker Family Bakery, the sign that said Walker and Carter Family Bakery caught the afternoon light and held it. The Callaway investment closed on a Thursday in April. Patricia, their attorney, the methodical woman who had reviewed the partnership twice and knew more about their business than anyone, except the Brugmas, two people running it, called Lily at 9 in the morning to confirm the wire had cleared. Lily was standing in the bakery kitchen, elbow deep in the first test batch of what she'd been developing for 6 weeks. A signature shortbread line she intended to pitch to regional grocery buyers by the end of summer. She answered the phone with one hand, listened, said thank you, and hung up. Then she stood at the prep table for exactly 10 seconds. Then she walked to the front of the bakery, where Ethan was restocking the display case, and said, without preamble, it cleared. Ethan stopped, set down what he was holding, looked at her. It cleared, she said again. He crossed the space between them in 3 steps and pulled her into a hug that surprised both of them, the force of it. The duration of it, the way he didn't let go immediately, but held on with the particular grip of someone who is expressing something they don't have better words for. She held on back. They stood like that in the front of the bakery for a moment that was theirs entirely. And neither of them said anything, because nothing needed saying. When they pulled apart, Lily looked at him with her eyes slightly bright. She would not call it crying. She was absolutely not crying in the front of her own bakery at 9 in the morning. We need to call the production space, she said. We do, he said. And set up the meeting with the grocery buyer contact Farrell gave us. We should. And I need to finish the shortbread batch. Lily. What? Can we have 10 seconds, he said. Before we start solving the next problem? She looked at him. And she did something she rarely allowed it herself. She stopped. Fully stopped. Let the moment exist without immediately converting it into action. 10 seconds, she said. They stood in their bakery. The one with both their names on the sign outside. The one that had gone from a drowning operation to a funded, growing business in 6 months, and they had their 10 seconds. Then Lily said, okay, and went back to the shortbread. And Ethan laughed. Because it was so completely her, and went back to the display case. The production space came together in May. It was a facility 20 minutes from the bakery, not huge, but correctly sized for what they needed. With commercial equipment that Lily had evaluated against their projected volume and declared acceptable in exactly those words. Acceptable. Ethan had learned to translate Lily's language by now. Acceptable meant she was satisfied. Good meant she was excited. Fine meant there was a problem she hadn't fully solved yet. She called the production space acceptable 3 times during the walkthrough. He knew she loved it. They hired 2 additional bakers for the production facility, people Lily vetted with the thoroughness she brought to every decision that mattered. Which was every decision. She conducted the interviews herself, asking questions that were specific and behavioral and designed to reveal how people actually worked rather than how they described their working. She hired a woman named Tara, 26, who had trained in France and come back to Colorado because she wanted to be somewhere the food mattered personally. And she hired a man named Jerome, 38, who had 20 years of commercial baking experience and an instinct for volume production that Lily recognized in the first interview and told Ethan about afterward in the car. He's better at production logistics than I am, she said. Ethan glanced at her. You're hiring someone better than you at something? I'm hiring someone better than me at the specific thing we need for the production facility, she said. That's not weakness. That's what you do when you're building something real instead of building a monument to yourself. She looked out the window. I've worked for people who couldn't do that. who surrounded themselves with people slightly less capable than them because it felt safer. A pause. "We're not doing that." "No," he said. "We're not." Jerome started the following Monday. By Wednesday, he and Lily had redesigned the production workflow in a way that reduced per unit time by 14%. She told Ethan about it at dinner that night. They had dinner together now, the three of them, most evenings, a fact that had settled into routine so naturally that it felt like it had all been there. And Sophie listened to the 14% figure and said, "Is that good?" "It's very good," Lily said. "How good?" "It means we can produce more product in the same time without increasing labor costs," Lily said. "Which means the margin improves, which means the business makes more money." Sophie considered this. "Can I get a raise in my allowance?" Ethan said no. Lily said, "That's actually a reasonable negotiation tactic." Sophie looked at her father with vindicated triumph. "Don't help her," Ethan said. "I'm always helping her," Lily said. And the way she said it, easy, warm, entirely natural, landed in the room like something that had always been true. Sophie got a $2 increase in her allowance. Ethan pretended to be annoyed. He wasn't. The signature shortbread line launched in June. Lily had been developing it since January, 12 weeks of testing, adjusting, rejecting, starting over. The final product was 3 flavors. The cranberry orange that Sophie had helped her perfect the previous November. A lavender honey that had taken 4 weeks to balance correctly. And a dark chocolate sea salt that Ethan had suggested in February as a joke. And that had turned out to be the best of the 3. She'd named the line Carter's Collection. Not Walker and Carter, just Carter. Ethan had asked her about that when she first told him. She'd looked at him steadily and said, "The bakery has both our names. This is mine. I spent 6 years being told I wasn't ready. I want my name on the thing that proves I was," he had said. "Then put your name on it." She had. The pitch meeting with the regional grocery buyer was on a Tuesday in June, which Lily noted was a Tuesday, which she claimed was a good omen. Because every significant thing in her life had happened on a Tuesday. Ethan pointed out that the first Tuesday of their acquaintance had involved him saying something careless and offensive 8 in the morning, before 8 in the morning. She said that had still led to the best thing in her life. Made it a good Tuesday by definition. He had no argument for that. The buyer's name was Sandra Okafor. She was the regional specialty foods director for a grocery chain with 42 locations across Colorado and Wyoming. And she had agreed to a 30-minute meeting based on Farrell's recommendation and a sample package Lily had sent 2 weeks prior. When they walked into Sandra's office, Sandra was already eating the dark chocolate sea salt shortbread, which Lily clocked immediately, and Ethan watched her clock, and he saw the almost invisible shift in her posture that meant she'd already won and was simply waiting for the conversation to confirm it. Sandra looked up. "Carter's Collection," she said. "This is yours?" "Yes," Lily said. "I've had this sample for 2 weeks," Sandra said. "I've eaten the dark chocolate one every morning with my coffee." She looked at Lily. "How are you not in every grocery store in Colorado?" Lily set her folder on the table. "That's what we're here to discuss." The meeting ran 90 minutes. Sandra had questions: production capacity, consistent quality control across volume, packaging, shelf life, pricing, and Lily answered everyone with the precision of someone who had lived inside these numbers for months. Ethan spoke twice, both times to add context about the bakery's standards and history. He was there as her partner, she was the room. At the end of 90 minutes, Sandra said, "I want to start with 15 locations. See how the product moves. If it performs the way I expect, we expand to full chain within 6 months." Lily said, "We'd like to begin with 20 locations. The production capacity supports it. And a stronger initial footprint gives us better data on regional preference variations." Sandra looked at her. 20 locations, Sandra said. 20, Lily confirmed. Sandra looked at the shortbread. Back at Lily. 20 locations, she said. Trial period. 3 months. Full review at 90 days. Agreed, Lily said. They shook on it. In the elevator going down, Ethan waited until the doors closed and then said, 20 locations. We could support 20, Lily said. You pushed her. She expected me to accept 15, Lily said. People who expect to be accepted always leave room for a push. She glanced at him. Was that too much? No, he said. It was exactly right. He paused. How did you know she'd say yes? I didn't, Lily said. But I knew she wanted the product. When someone wants the product, the negotiation is just math. She looked at him. You're not bothered that I pushed without checking with you? We're equal partners, he said. You had the room. You made the call. She studied him for a moment. Most people would have been bothered. I'm not most people, he said. She looked at him for another moment. Then she said, quietly, no, you're really not. Carter's collection hit 20 grocery locations on the 1st of July. By the middle of the month, 3 locations had reordered ahead of schedule. By the end of July, Sandra Okafor called Lily directly to tell her that the dark chocolate sea salt had become the top-selling specialty shortbread in 7 of the 20 stores, and that she wanted to begin the conversation about full chain expansion 4 weeks ahead of the 90-day mark. Lily took the call standing in the production facility with Jerome and Tara, watching her face. When she hung up, Jerome said, "Good news?" She looked at him. "We're going to need to increase production by 30%. Jerome said, "I'll have a new workflow plan to you by tomorrow morning." "I know you will," she said. "That's why I hired you." She called Ethan. He answered on the first ring. She told him what Sandra had said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Lily, I know," she said. "I want to say something." "Say it." "I want to say that I know how hard you have worked for this," he said. "Not just since October. Your whole life. Every room that passed you over. Every person who looked at you and made the wrong calculation. Every morning you walked in somewhere with your folder and your composure and your absolute refusal to be less than what you are." His voice was steady. "This is what that looks like. This phone call, right now, is what all of that work looks like. And I want you to let it be that. Don't solve the next problem for 5 more minutes. Just let this be what it is." She stood in the production facility, and she pressed her thumbnail against her index finger, and this time she let it go. She stopped containing it. She let whatever it was, the years of it, the weight of it, the particular exhaustion of being better than what people assumed and doing it every day without acknowledgement. She let it come up, and she stood with it for a moment. "Okay," she said. Her voice was slightly rough. "Okay," he said. They stayed on the phone in silence for a moment. Not an uncomfortable silence. The kind that exists between people who have run out of words, because what they're feeling is larger than language. Then she said, "5 minutes is up." "It's been 40 seconds, he said. "I need to call Sandra back and confirm the expansion timeline," she said. He laughed, and she laughed with him. And Jerome and Tara exchanged a look that said everything about what they were witnessing. The twist that nobody saw coming arrived in August. It was a Wednesday. Lily was at the production facility, and Ethan was managing the bakery alone, which he was fully capable of now, something that would have seemed impossible 11 months ago when a woman walked in that he didn't recognize. She was around 60, well-dressed, with the particular composure of someone who moved through rooms expecting to be respected and generally was. She looked at the display case, then at the sign on the wall behind the counter, Walker and Carter Family Bakery, then at Ethan. "I'm looking for Lily Carter," she said. "She's not here today," Ethan said. "Can I help you?" "My name is Barbara Carter," the woman said. "I'm her mother." Ethan went completely still. In 11 months, Lily had mentioned her mother exactly once in passing, in the context of a recipe, a sentence that had closed as quickly as it opened. He'd noted the closure. He hadn't pushed. It was the same respect she gave his closed doors. "She's at our production facility," he said carefully. "I can call her." "Please don't," Barbara said. "I came here first because I wanted to. I wanted to see the place before I saw her." She looked around the bakery. She told me about it in an email 3 weeks ago. First contact in 2 years. Ethan absorbed that. 2 years. Barbara looked at the sign again. "Carter's Collection," she said, reading the small promotional display Lily had put together near the register. "That's her name." "It is," Ethan said. She put her name on something, Barbara said. There was something in the way she said not simple pride. Something more complicated. Something that had traveled a long distance to arrive here. She did, Ethan said. Barbara looked at him. You're the one who hired her. Yes. She told me about the first day. In the email. A pause. She told me what you said. And what she said back. And what you did after. She studied him. She said you stepped around the counter. I did, she said. That was the moment she decided you were worth the trouble. Ethan looked at this woman, at Lily's eyes in an older face. The same directness, the same quality gaze that didn't miss things, and he understood completely where Lily had learned to stand in rooms that didn't deserve her and build something real anyway. She'd had a mother who knew how to stand. Something had gone wrong between them. Years ago, and it wasn't his story to know. But the woman in front of him had Lily's eyes and Lily's posture and had driven to a bakery in Colorado to see the place before she saw her daughter because she wanted to understand the shape of the life Lily had built. Can I get you something? Ethan said. Coffee. And I think you should try the dark chocolate sea salt shortbread. Barbara sat down at the corner table, the same table Sophie had claimed. The same table where Helen Marsh's book club met every other Tuesday. And Ethan brought her coffee and the shortbread and went to the back and called Lily. She answered immediately. Your mother is here, he said. The silence on the other end lasted 3 full seconds. In the bakery? She said, sitting at the corner table, eating the dark chocolate shortbread. A pause. She drove here to see the place first. She wanted to understand what you'd built before she saw you. Another silence. He could hear her breathing, the thumbnail against the index finger happening across town as she. Lily started. She has your eyes, Ethan said. And your posture. And she looked at the sign with your name on it, and said she put her name on something like it was the most important sentence in the English language. Lily was quiet. Do you want me to ask her to leave, he said. I will. Right now. No question, no, Lily said quickly. Decisively. The way she decided everything. No. I'm coming. She was there in 22 minutes. Ethan saw her through the front window before she came in the way she stopped on the sidewalk for a moment. Squared her shoulders. Adjusted her jacket. The armor going on. He knew that gesture. He'd watched her do it. Hundreds of times without understanding what it was. Now he understood. She came in. She saw her mother at the corner table. Barbara saw her daughter at the door. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then Lily walked to the table and sat down across from her mother, and Ethan went to the back of the bakery and gave them the room entirely. He didn't hear the conversation. He didn't try to. He restocked shelves. He'd already restocked and stayed in the back for 40 minutes because that was what the moment required. When Lily came to the back doorway, her eyes were red, but her face was composed. The armor was still on, but something underneath it had shifted. She's going to stay for a few days, Lily said. Good, Ethan said. She wants to meet Sophie. Sophie will love her. Lily looked at him. You knew what to say. On the phone. You knew exactly what to tell me. I told you what I saw, he said. Most people would have handled that badly, she said. You keep saying that, he said. People this. Most people that. Because it keeps being true, she said. He crossed the kitchen and took her face in his hands the way he'd done on New Year's Eve. The way that had become its own language between them, and she closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. And when she opened them, she was steadier. Thank you, she said. You don't have to thank me, he said. I want to, she said. I'm choosing to. She stepped back. Looked at him, Ethan. I need to ask you something. Ask. She looked at him directly. No armor. All Lily. Are we building something permanent? She said. I'm not asking about the bakery. I'm asking about us. Because I need to know if what I'm doing, letting my mother back in, letting Sophie get closer, letting myself, she paused. I need to know if this is the thing I'm building my life around. Because I don't do things halfway. You know that. I never have. He looked at her. At the woman who had walked through his door 11 months ago, with a folder and a direct gaze and a quiet refusal to be anything less than extraordinary. Even in rooms that couldn't see it. he said. Yes, one word. The same number of words she'd given him when she turned around at that door on the first morning. She held his gaze. Okay, she said, and she went back out front to her mother. He stood in the kitchen of his bakery, their bakery, and let himself have 10 seconds. And then he went back to work. He proposed in September, not with fanfare, not with a restaurant reservation and a rehearsed speech. He did it the way everything real in his life had happened in the bakery. On a Tuesday morning, before the coffee was finished. He had the ring in his jacket pocket for 2 weeks before he used it. He'd bought it with Sophie's help. That was its own story. Sophie's absolute precision about what Lily would and wouldn't want. The 45 minutes they spent at the jewelry counter, with Sophie eliminating options with the evaluating efficiency of a professional consultant. The way she finally pointed to a simple solitaire on a warm gold band and said, "That one. It doesn't perform. It just is." He'd looked at his daughter and thought about where she had come from Claire. Yes, and from him, yes, but also from somewhere entirely her own. And he'd bought the ring and carried it for 2 weeks. Lily arrived Tuesday morning at 5:45, the way she always did. She set the 2 coffees on the counter near the register the way she always did. She started to untie her jacket and move toward the kitchen. The way she always did. He said, "Lily." She turned around. He had the ring box in his hand. Open. He hadn't dropped to one knee. He'd thought about it and decided that wasn't them. That wasn't who they were, together. He was just standing in the bakery, holding an open ring box with the steady directness she had taught him. By example, was the right way to ask for something you actually meant. She looked at the ring. At him. At the ring again. "It's Tuesday," he said, "and I figured I owed you a good one, since the first one was such a disaster." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob and was entirely Lily Carter. "Lily," he said, "you walked into my life through a rainy door and you handed me back everything I'd forgotten how to want. You built something here, not just the bakery. Not just the business, you built something in me. In Sophie. In this town that didn't know what it was missing until you showed up." He paused. "I know you don't do things halfway. Neither do I. Not anymore." Another pause. "Will you marry me?" She looked at him for a long moment. "You practiced that," she said. "Several times," he admitted. "In the car and the shower. And once to Sophie, who told me the business building part was good, but the rainy door line was a little much." Lily pressed her lips together, containing the smile, failing. "Sophie was right," she said. "She usually is." "Yes," Lily said. "Ethan." "Yes." He put the ring on her finger. She held her hand out and looked at it for a moment. Simple solitaire. Warm gold band. Exactly her. And then she looked at him. "Sophie picked it," he said. "I know," Lily said. "It's exactly what I would have chosen." She paused. "Tell her she has excellent taste." "She knows," he said. They were married in October. Exactly 1 year after the first rainy Tuesday. The bakery's backyard, the small, concrete paved space behind the building, where Ethan had eaten lunch alone for 5 years. Where Lily and Vanessa had sat on the back step eating shortbread after the Thanksgiving rush. Where Sophie had once fallen asleep in a folding chair during a late Friday order. They strung lights across it and set up 30 chairs, and it held everyone who mattered. Sophie stood between them during the ceremony. She had insisted on this with the calm authority of someone who had already decided how the event would go and was simply informing the relevant parties. She wore a dress she'd picked herself and held both their hands during the vows and looked at the officiant with the evaluating gaze she brought to everything, as if she were assessing the quality of his performance. Barbara Carter sat in the front row and cried openly, which was the first time Lily had seen her mother cry in 20 years. They were still finding their way back to each other, slowly. Honestly, with the particular care of people who know that trust is rebuilt in small increments, and not all at once. But she was in the front row. She was there. That was its own kind of beginning. Dennis Farrell came. Helen Marsh came with 4 members of the book club. Vanessa came from Denver and hugged Lily for a long time and said nothing, because some things don't need words. Jerome and Tara came. Richard Calloway came. Lily had not expected that. And when he walked in, she'd raised an eyebrow, and he'd said, "You didn't think I was going to miss this," which she had no response to. Patricia the attorney came, because she had been there at the beginning of the business, and the business was inseparable from everything else. Ryan Walker came, Ethan's brother, and he shook Lily's hand and said he was sorry, specifically, and without hedging, for what he'd said in the kitchen that first week. She said she knew, and she meant it, and that was the end of it. Ethan's mother cried, from the moment Lily walked out until the moment the vows bought in. When Lily passed her on the way to her seat afterward, Ethan's mother took her hand and said, "He smiles before coffee now. You know, he never used to do that." Lily squeezed her hand and said, "I know. I noticed." When the officiant asked Ethan if he had anything to say, he said, "On a rainy Tuesday morning 14 months ago, said something careless to the most capable person who had ever walked into my bakery, and instead of leaving, which she had every right to do, she turned around, and I have spent every day since trying to be worth that decision." He looked at Lily. "I intend to keep trying." When the officiant asked Lily, she was quiet for a moment, the way she was quiet when she was deciding something. Then she said, "I spent a long time walking into rooms that didn't see me, doing work that wasn't credited, being told I wasn't ready by people who were afraid of what ready looked like on me." She paused. "And then I walked into a bakery that was sinking, and I found a man who was also sinking. And instead of pretending otherwise, he said, 'Wait.'" She held Ethan's gaze. "Nobody had ever asked me to stay before. Not like that. Not like they meant it." Another pause. "I'm staying. I've been staying. And I'm not going anywhere." Sophie, standing between them, holding both their hands, said quietly but audibly, "That was better than Dad's." Gentle laughter moved through the 30 chairs. The lights strung overhead held everything warm and close. And the bakery, both their names on the sign, both their fingerprints on every surface. The place where Lily had set a folder down on a counter and said, "Judge me by my work," and then stayed. To prove it, the bakery stood around them like a witness. A year after that, Carter's collection was in 112 grocery locations across 5 states. Jerome had expanded the production team to 9 people. Tara had developed 2 product lines that Lily was evaluating for launch the following spring. The bakery itself had become what it was always capable of becoming under the right hands, a neighborhood institution. A place people brought their children and their book clubs and their Tuesday mornings and their Tuesdays and their need for something like someone had paid attention to it. Sophie turned 10. She told Lily at her birthday dinner that she wanted to learn the full ganache process, not the simplified version, the real one, and Lily said yes and began teaching her that same weekend. Barbara Carter came back for Christmas. She and Lily sat in the bakery after close on Christmas Eve and talked for 3 hours, and Ethan kept Sophie occupied in the living room and didn't ask afterward what they'd talked about. Lily told him some of it later. In bed, in the quiet way they talked at the end of days, when Sophie was asleep and the bakery was closed and the world narrowed to just the 2 of them. He listened. He didn't try to fix it. She didn't need it fixed. She needed it heard. He was good at that now. On the 2nd anniversary of the first rainy Tuesday, Ethan came into the bakery at 6 in the morning and found 2 coffees on the counter near the register. He picked one up. Lily came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, and looked at him. "You're thinking about the first morning," she said. "I'm thinking about how close it was," he said. "I told you," she said. "I would have come back." "I know," he said. "But I'm glad I said wait." She crossed the bakery and stood next to him at the counter, and they drank their coffee, side by side in the quiet, before the morning started. The way they did every day now, the way they had done every Tuesday for 2 years, the way they intended to do for every Tuesday that followed. Outside, the sign held both their names. Inside, the bakery smelled like cranberry orange shortbread and fresh bread, and the particular warmth of a place where someone had decided, against the odds, to stay and build something real. Lily Carter had walked in through a rainy door, with a folder pressed against her chest like armor, looking for a job she deserved, and she had found something better than a job. Better than an apology, Better than the grudging recognition of people who had underestimated her for years. She had found a place where her name was on the door. And that was never, ever going to be nothing.